Well, hello and welcome back to an episode of Talkin Walks after quite some gap. Today we're not going to be in the leafy lanes of Kent or on the Kent footpaths around the coast. Today we're in good old London town, starting a 4-part series of music sites in London. I hope you'll enjoy them. Now, this isn't intended to be a comprehensive tour of all of London's music venues. That would take longer to film than Game of Thrones. But really, it's a snapshot mixture of clubs and venues, places of interest, snippets of miscellanea related to contemporary music from the rock and roll era right through to the 60s, 70s and 2000s. We're starting part 1 in Soho. So here we are in one of Soho's typical little alleyways, Tyler's Court. And Tyler's Court will lead us out into a very well-known street in the Soho area, which had one of London's top music clubs, the Marquee, at number 90 Wardour Street. Sadly, not there anymore. Number 90 Wardour Street, the most famous and second location of the legendary Marquee Club. Arguably the single most important live music venue in the UK for over 20 years. And the list of artists that played the Marquee is far too long for me to read out on screen, so I'll put some scrolling text underneath to give you an idea who played here. It relocated from its original 1950s location on the 13th of March 1964 from the basement of the Academy Cinema at 165 Oxford Street, where it featured a mixture of jazz, skiffle and blues acts such as Muddy Waters, the Rolling Stones, the Yardbirds, the Animals, Manfred Mann and John Mayall. The Who played 22 consecutive Tuesdays at one point at this club and were paid the princely sum of £50 a gig. There is a plaque outside celebrating Keith Moon, and as it reads, legendary rock drummer with The Who performed here at the site of the Marquee Club in the 1960s. In the 1980s, the Marquee became a crucial live venue for bands such as Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, the Choir Boys, Metallica, Robin Trower, Genesis, who were builders Garden Wall, and Marillion. In 1988, the Marquee was sold for redevelopment, the archenemy of music venues everywhere. It moved to 105 Charing Cross Road after. At the rear of the building, in Richmond Mews, the Marquee Studios were established. They were used at first by the Moody Blues manager and producer Alex Murray to produce Go Now, which was done in the garage. It was also used by The Clash, Elton John and the Rolling Stones. This is 59 Old Compton Street, formerly the location of the Two Eyes Coffee Bar, the famous 1950s rock and roll venue where Cliff Richard, Adam Faith, Tommy Steele, Hank Marvin and Marty Wilde all performed. Peter Grant, Led Zeppelin's fearsome road manager, also worked as a doorman here. So this is 33 Wardour Street, once the home of the Flamingo Jazz Club. It was the venue of the Rolling Stones' first original lineup performance in 1963. It later became the Whiskey A Go-Go Club, an iconic club which had members including Jimi Hendrix, Pete Townsend and Paul McCartney. It eventually became the well-known WAG Club, nothing to do with footballers' wives, but now it's just another O'Neill's. So here we are, 47 Fred Street, Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, famous for the many appearances of jazz music icons in the 60s and 70s, and also the venue for Jimi Hendrix's final performance in 1970. It started here in 1965, having moved from its previous site at Gerrard Street, where it began in 1959. Well, we're now at Denmark Street, just off of Shaftesbury Avenue. Here there are 8 sites associated with music, and I'll be taking you to each of them now. So here at number 6 Denmark Street was a major musical landmark in the 60s. It was Regent Sounds, a small recording studio that was used by a huge number of influential artists, including the Kinks, Tom Jones, the Small Faces, Jimi Hendrix, Manfred Mann and Stevie Wonder. It's also where the Rolling Stones recorded their first 2 albums. Number 8 Denmark Street used to be Mills Music Publishers, where Elton John worked as an office boy in 1965. Incredibly, Mills turned down the chance to buy The Sound of Silence and Homeward Bound by Paul Simon in 1965. Oops. Number 5 Denmark Street used to be the office of New Musical Express, a very well-known music magazine in the 70s and 80s. Number 9 Denmark Street used to be the head office of Melody Maker, the premium music magazine in the UK. Here at number 9A was the site of the La Gioconda Cafe, which for a short while found a camper van parked outside with a certain David Jones, now known of course as the late great David Bowie, living in. It gave him access to the fashionistas and the movers and shakers of the British music business. (26) Denmark Street used to be known as a 12 Bar Club. Artists such as Adele, Martha Wainwright, Katie Tunstall, Damien Rice, The Libertines, Keane, C6 Steve and Jeff Buckley all got early life performance experience here. Sadly it closed despite lots of protests in January 2015. Has now reopened as the lower third. So this is number 2 Greek Street. Not really a direct musical connection, but it used to be the location of the Gay Hussar restaurant where the Labour MP Tom Dryburgh, allegedly a Soviet spy, was said to have tried to persuade Mick Jagger and his girlfriend at the time, Marianne Faithfull, to become ambassadors for the Labour Party. His offer wasn't taken up. So, coming from the last venue, which was Greek Street, leads us nicely into Soho Square. A little bit of a semi-oasis in the noise of Soho and the London area. So we're going to cut across the square now and go to number 1 Soho Square, because that also has quite a musical heritage. This building at number 1 Soho Square is the Paul McCartney's headquarters of his company MPL Communications. This was formed in 1970 when Paul McCartney formed Wings, and in the basement is said to be a complete replica of Abbey Road Studio number 2, where the Beatles famously recorded so many fantastic tracks. Wish we could go in. Well, we're now at number 17 St Anne's Court on the south side of Dean Street, and it was here that Barry and John Sheffield opened Trident Studios, where the Beatles recorded Hey Jude on the 31st of July 1968, as well as some of the tracks from the White Album. This is a prime musical landmark, given that David Bowie recorded Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory and Diamond Dogs here. Elton John recorded Your Song, Queen recorded Bohemian Rhapsody, and Lou Reed recorded Transformer. Also, Free's All Right Now, Carly Simon's You're So Vain, George Harrison's My Sweet Lord was recorded here, and Genesis and the Boomtown Rats are amongst many other bands that recorded in this studio. Seems mad that a studio as famous as this is tucked away in some tiny little alleyway off the back of Soho. So here we are now in Charing Cross Road. Not quite Soho, but it does kind of round off this first episode in the series of musical sites of Talking Walks, because it's now, sadly, for Wetherspoons, but it was the site that the Marquee moved to when it left its original Wardour Street location. It's also where Dream Theatre recorded their first live album in 1993,